Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. My name is Johnny Temple. I'm the publisher of Akashic Books, a Brooklyn-based independent book publishing company, and I'm also the chair of the Brooklyn Literary Council that does a lot of the planning and the programming for the annual Brooklyn Book Festival. I'm one of the co-founders of the festival, and this is our 13th year, and it's incredibly exciting to be here, and it's wonderful to see this standing room only audience for this programming celebrating the work of N.K. Jemisin. Last night, we presented our annual Best of Brooklyn Award, called the BoBi Award, to Nora. It's an award that we give out every year at the festival. Which started in our second year, and the idea is to celebrate the body of work of an author with strong Brooklyn ties. It's not about a single book, it's about a whole body of work. And our previous honorees have been Walter Mosley, Edwidge Danticat, Jonathan Lethem, Jacqueline Woodson, Pete Hamill, Lois Lowry, Jhumpa Lahiri, James McBride, Paul Auster Colson Whitehead, and John Ashbery. We're very excited to be presenting the award this year to N.K. Jemisin. It's the first time we've presented it to a science fiction and fantasy writer, and our timing is, as usual, very good. I remember last year we presented the award to Colson Whitehead, and I sent Colson the email and asking him if he would be in town and be willing to accept the award, and he said yes, I would love to. And then 2 weeks later, he won the Pulitzer Prize. So, and then this year, just like 2 or 3 weeks ago, Nora won the Hugo Award for the third consecutive year. The Hugo Award began in 1953, and most people consider it the very highest honor for science fiction and fantasy writers, and no one has ever won it 3 years in a row until now. So I am going to introduce Nora and P. Djèlí Clark, who will be leading the conversation with Nora, and then I will step away. Let me see if I can keep my notes in order here.
There's one more chair up here if anybody wants to use this. You just have to remember to put it back. Two chairs over here.
So
as long as it's just somebody puts it back.
The book that that Nora just won the Hugo Award for is this one, The Stone Sky, which is the third book in the Broken Earth trilogy. The first book in that trilogy is The Fifth Season, and the second book is The Obelisk Gate, and both those books also won the Hugo Award. Nora previously won the Locus Award for her first novel, The 100,000 Kingdoms, and her short fiction and novels have been nominated multiple times for World Fantasy, Nebula, and RT Reviewers' Choice Awards. She is also a science fiction and fantasy reviewer for the New York Times. P. Djèlí Clark likes creating fantastic, dangerous, and exciting worlds, usually with heroines and heroes, almost always with magic and monsters. His short fiction has appeared in Daily Science Fiction, Heroic Fantasy Quarterly, Lightspeed, Tor.com, and in print anthologies, including Griots, Steampunk, Myriad Lands, and Hidden Youth. You can find his ramblings on SSF history and diversity at www.pdjelieclark.com, where he blogs. So I really want this room to vibrate with the applause before I step away.
Thank you.
I think they like you.
I'm getting that sense.
Yeah.
Okay. All
So, thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you for allowing us to have this time with you.
Thank you for coming down.
Oh,
This is
no
also dealing with New York traffic on a weekend.
Oh yeah, that's something else. So thank you
Yeah.
everyone for coming out. And so I guess let's go ahead and just jump into it. Have
Sure.
this discussion.
Sure.
We can talk about. So you mind if I ask you a few questions? Okay.
No. No, you can't ask me anything. You're not allowed.
So I'm going to use I'm going to use the great phone, of course, because we're trying to print out anything. And so, I mean, there's so many things I want to ask you about these magnificent books that you've created, these magnificent worlds that you've created. And I suppose one of the first things I'm going to ask is, I'm always curious about how an author's social setting, in many ways, impacts the writing. And so, just a little background on you. You were born in Iowa, if I'm correct?
Yeah, although I don't remember it.
Okay.
I was literally like 1 when I left.
Okay. But you were raised,
yeah.
you were raised what, between New York and Alabama at
Yep.
some point?
Yep. We
Right?
lived over in Brooklyn Heights back before it was cool. Inexpensive.
Okay. So you lived for a while in Massachusetts and Boston, right? And
In Springfield.
now, Springfield? We'll just say Boston.
Yeah.
And now you're in New York. So I want to know, is there a little bit of that in your stories? Like, do you think there's a little bit of those many settings that you've come from, like little Easter eggs in the Broken Earth series or in the Inheritance trilogy? A little bit of Fort Greene here, a little bit of Springfield there.
I wish Fort Greene I couldn't afford it when I first moved back. Okay, so yes, except that it's always the things that, the parts of my life that people don't mention very often that end up sort of influencing me most. Like, I grew up in Mobile, but I wrote a story about Birmingham, specifically about Pratt City in Birmingham, which is the black neighborhood of Birmingham, because that's where my father is from, and that's where my father's side of the family lives. So when I ever went to Birmingham to visit my family there, my experience of Alabama was kind of most imprinted with that part of Alabama, more almost than Mobile. And, you know, people are like, oh, Iowa. And I'm like, no, I don't remember Iowa. I don't even like corn. I actually do like corn, but I'm just real picky about it. Anyway, but, you know, like New Orleans had a big influence on me, even though I only lived there for 4 years while I was in college. And, you know, I lived in Boston 10 years, and I have not written a story about Boston. Sorry, 8 years, 2 years in Springfield. So I haven't written anything about Massachusetts at all. I basically like blotted that part of my life out entirely. And you live in New England now.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
in Hartford, Connecticut.
Okay.
We shall not speak of it.
All right. Okay. All right. But, you know, solidarity.
Yeah.
But, you know, so yeah, I mean, the background of any writer influences what they're doing. You know, like actually one of the things that sort of fascinates me about your writings a lot, and because I'm going to be talking about his writing too. If you were not paying attention to Djèlí Clark, you should be. You should be going out and finding his short stories. You should find his blog, Musings of Disgruntled Haradrim, where he's got awesome essays that, I like your essays like first. Like I didn't actually know you wrote for a long ass time.
That's how we met, because I wrote about the Dothraki
Yeah.
twerk team.
Oh,
And you,
right, that was
pointed
it.
out.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a title. trust me.
Yes. No, his essays are awesome. So, so we're going to be talking like back and forth a little bit here. But anyway, but yeah, so all that has influenced things.
Okay. So, you know, in thinking about the works I want to discuss with you, so I first came in contact with your work, of course, with the Inheritance trilogy, which blew my mind. I still, when people are always, you know, asking me, I want something different in sci-fi and fantasy to read, something that challenges me, I still point them towards that series, right? And so I could sit here and talk to you all day about that, but I feel that no one talks enough to me about your Dream Blood duology.
Yeah,
And I
I'm
know
not
that's
sure what's
going
up
to-
with that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And I can see you taking that deep
There's a few
breath
people in
as
here
kind
who
of,
like it.
going to a place there and discussing it. But I think no one talks about it enough. And so,
I don't understand what that's about. I am still trying to figure out what that's about. I will say that Dream Blood, the Dream Blood duology, well, first off, it's a duology, it's not a trilogy, so some people are like, I don't read duologies. You know, in fantasy, there's like the trilogy loyalist group. I don't even know what to call them.
trilogist.
Trilogists. Yeah, basically. But the Dream Blood was my most traditional fantasy story. And it's the one that I could not get published at first because it was basically full of black people, and that was a problem for the fantasy field at that point. And I sort of jokingly talk about the fact that when they wouldn't publish The Dreamblood, I turned around and wrote The 100,000 Kingdoms, which was actually a blacker book in every way except its cast. You know, it was a more confrontational book. It talked more explicitly about systemic oppression, microaggressions, all these other things, whereas The Dreamblood was just a story about people doing things. They just were black people doing things. So, you know, it's fascinating to me that people are less interested in The Dreamblood even now, and I don't really understand what that's about. I got nothing. Maybe you can offer something, or maybe the audience can offer some opinions on it.
You know, one of the things that struck me, you called it traditional fantasy, and was that it had this inspired African setting, right? In some ways, would you?
I would call it that.
So it has it's not Africa as we know it, but
it's on another planet.
Yeah.
But it's ancient Egypt. It's ancient Egypt with like weird Freudian magic. It's not really Freud, it's actually Jung. But anyway, nobody knows Jung, so I have to say Freud. Anyway, it's set in a extremely fantasy version of ancient Egypt and Nubia, and a lot of people seem to feel like because it's on another planet, that doesn't count. But, you know, it's no different from any other epic fantasy out there that's inspired by medieval Europe. It's just on another planet where the weird magic happens. So that was intentionally what I was trying to set out to do. I just wasn't interested in writing medieval Europe.
Right.
So.
Okay.
I'm curious as to why. And I won't say that the books have not done well. They've earned out. I get nice royalty payments from those books, but they're not as nice as the royalty payments from my other books. So it is interesting.
So that's a plug. If you have not read The Dreamblood Duology, please.
Yes, let's change that.
All right. And so, okay, let's pick up on, I think it's interesting you pointed out that in many ways you thought that, that your second series was actually blacker than the other one in a sense, except not having black characters, but it talked about all these traumatic histories. So you've spoken in previous interviews about how diverse histories of systematic racism, from Ferguson to Black Lives Matter to reservation schools in Australia, helped inspire the work that I won't say you're the most famous for now, but certainly the one that has gotten the greatest acclaim, the Broken Earth series. Right? So I'm curious, what are the challenges that you had, and what are the challenges you think writers face in translating these real-world traumatic histories, because they are traumatic, into speculative fiction?
This is actually a question that I kind of want to turn back on you.
But I worked so hard to come up with
all
this, but I
right,
didn't
fine.
come up with an answer.
Okay.
No, but go ahead. Yeah.
But
we can talk about it.
Okay. Because see, when you're dealing with actual history of actual people who actually suffered and died for these oppressive systems, you have to make sure that you're getting the history right, and you have to make sure that you are respecting the pain of the survivors.
Right.
You know, in one case, for example, I tried to build Essen's experience in the Broken Earth, where she was living in Torimo, as build that on like closeted queer people, and the experience of being closeted and then being outed. And I took out a couple of elements that I think were too obvious, because I just felt like I'm not queer myself. It's not my place to evoke that history or to take that experience and use it in a way that I guess felt exploitative, right, or maybe was too overt. You know, and the same thing applies to, I'm obviously drawing on like the Holocaust. I'm obviously drawing on, you know, there's a number of recent, still living memory tragedies that I was trying to draw on. And these are not historical events. History is a living, still happening thing. As long as there are people who remember this, who are affected by this, whose families are echoing the pain of oppression, the pain of these traumas and these tragedies, then I have to be as respectful of these things as I can be. So what I just tried to do is just research the living hell out of all of it, and when possible, talk to people who actually have experienced some of this. I have friends who are willing to serve as kind of sensitivity readers for me. I run some things past them. Other things, I don't necessarily have anybody that I can ask, and I just do as much research as I can. And I'm prepared to just take it if I screw that up, and people tell me I screwed that up, then I try and learn from that and I try and get better the next time. And I have screwed some things up. Now how do you handle that? Because I'm going to throw that back on you.
Right. Full disclosure here, my day job, I'm a mild-mannered science fiction writer at night, but my day job, I'm a professor, assistant professor of history, and my focus is actually on slavery and freedom in the Black Atlantic world. So these topics about traumas certainly come up both in what I do professionally and what I teach. And I sometimes, in some ways, I teach the more literal version to students straightforward, and I have to deal with how do I talk about these histories that, as you said, is respectful of the descendants of those who have endured these tragedies, as well as, for me, and I think this is something you're saying as well, dealing with those people who survived, those people who endured those tragedies, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm talking about slavery, or if I'm talking about something more recent like lynching, how often do I show pictures of that, right? At what point does it become exploitative in my discussion of it? At what point is it educational? It's a balance.
Yeah.
And I can imagine in attempting to bring it into the speculative realm, that's even more so, because people may view, well, you're using these traumas and now you're inserting them into the fantastic, right? And so this is one of those challenges I think that as writers we may face. But.
Well, how do you handle dealing with traumas and tragedies that are not from the African diaspora?
Right.
Because, I've seen you work a few of those in.
Yeah.
But, this is the thing that I often kind of struggle with is, if these are not my stories to tell,
Right.
And they aren't. The sad and ugly truth of systemic oppression is that it's the same system affecting different groups of people in different ways.
Right.
And so, you kind of have to talk about the interconnectedness of these horrors. But then you're inherently stepping into spaces where there are other people who should be telling that story.
Exactly.
You're right. It's a balance.
It's a balance, yeah.
But yeah, how do you, or have you struggled with that, or?
Oh, I have struggled with. There are certain histories that I may be invoking in my writings. Like you said, if it's not something that is more so, I would say, own voices. I like, how am I bringing this up, right? How am I going to approach this? And I mean, I think there's always self-doubt. You're always questioning yourself, or whether I should go there, or perhaps I shouldn't. And understanding, I think, as you said, that one, it takes a lot of research. It takes a great deal of empathy. And I think that being empathetic to it, I think, is sometimes the difference between tipping over into exploitation.
Yeah.
And understanding why you're even bringing this to the table to begin with. Is it simply a gimmick? Is it a tool? Or are you trying to elucidate something about those histories that's important through fiction?
Yeah.
And I think you have to have empathy to do that. Right? You have to see whatever trauma this is that happened, you have to see those who went through it as people. Right?
I think it also helps to remember that history is still a work in progress, that it is not a thing of the past.
Right.
This was the thing that struck me about the short story of yours that I was commenting about earlier, the 9 Negro Teeth. I'm mangling the title.
The Secret Lies of the 9 Negro Teeth of George Washington.
I can't remember a thing. All right, so thank you very much for that title. But the fact that you, in these little vignettes where you're talking about each of the teeth and where they came from and their history, you're actually talking about modern exploitation, modern, the echo of trauma down generations, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, the livingness of history is a thing that I had to learn. You know, I'm not a historian, I just like read it. But, you know, so that was sort of fascinating to me to see. And it's a thing that I try to keep in mind in my own fiction. That is one of the reasons why with The Broken Earth that I tried to show the generational effect of what, of not just generationally in Essen and her daughter, but also in the history of Sil Anagist and Sil Anagist's effect on the present and so forth. So the fact that, you know, some of it is just like those who forget history are doomed to repeat it, but also these systems are so self-perpetuating that something drastic must be done to break them. Not necessarily the end of the world, but...
So that's great for my next question about drasticness.
Okay,
and it's going to bring us back to this theme of enslavement.
Okay.
So one of those traumas that comes up often in your work is enslavement, whether of gods or energy controlling origins. Am I pronouncing that?
Origins is
origins.
What, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so.
But there's also an underlying theme of rebellion and vengeance in all of those, at least that I see, as an almost inevitable, even perhaps justifiable end result to oppression. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm always drawn by that in a sense.
I am.
Or am I getting it all wrong?
No. You're getting it completely right. I am sort of constantly astounded by how stupid our world is. By the fact that if we have the intelligence to set up societies that can be sustainable, that can make everyone at least eat, if not be happy and well off. We have the ability to craft societies like this. And when you look at human history, again and again, we craft societies where a small number of people benefit and everybody else struggles. And we craft these predatory systems that aren't even good for everyone. Even the small number of people that are getting some money out of it, they're still struggling. They still sleep with one eye open, fearful of the person creeping in through the window who's going to stab them for all the shit they've done. Oops, sorry, watch my language. Nah, fuck it. Anyway, and so it's not even a good system for those people. And yet, this is a thing that we continually perpetuate. And so it irritates me enough that I am constantly writing about the fact that those things they do go hand in hand. You build an exploitative system that tortures people, that makes people's lives hell, of course they're gonna come stab you. What do you expect? And so, you know, and if you continue to perpetuate these systems, the stabbing will be worse. So maybe you should stop. You know, I mean, that's the theme. Maybe you should fucking stop. The end. Nora Jemisin. Okay. I'm sorry.
That could be your next book.
That's my next book. Maybe you should just fucking stop. And that's the entire book. One big sentence. Page 1. Maybe you. Period. Anyway.
10,000 word review. No, but no, that's actually profound that you're speaking on this, because the entire time you're reading it, it comes back to, again, coming from our own, I'm thinking of slave revolts, of course, and all these things. And and like what you just said there are literally stories of slave owners who would say, yes, I love this slave system, but I don't sleep at night because I never know what's going to happen.
Guilty conscience will hurt you. Yeah, I mean, and also paranoia will get you. I mean, you know, you are the only family on the plantation where you have torn apart families, tortured people, and so forth, and you trust these people to guard you and keep your land safe. That doesn't sound like a good idea to me. And when you look at actual history, it was full of people stabbing the hell out of their slave owners. So, you know, I don't know why they continue to perpetuate this. Well, no, I know exactly why. But, you know, the idea that the short-term gain of these systems is somehow worth the long-term horror that you inflict and upon yourself as well. I've never understood why why we as a society would do that. I believe in the fundamental intelligence of human beings. I believe we have the intelligence to think our way out of a lot of situations and to change and grow and develop in really fascinating ways. And we devote so much of that intelligence to stupidity, to stupid systems, to creating these short-term gain systems that will destroy us ultimately. I read Octavia Butler's Lilith's Brood / Xenogenesis series, where she's got aliens come down and just say humanity is just fatally flawed. They have intelligence, but they're also hierarchical, and they put the intelligence in the service of that hierarchialism.
We'll take
I think
it.
I left out a syllable somewhere.
Yeah.
And this is a fatal flaw. And the whole series is about humanity saying, we can change, we can fix this. I don't know that I agree with that, but I would like for us to start trying at some point. And I'm rambling now.
No, it's a good ramble. I think everyone loves your rambles. Your rambles are better than some people's very long thought pieces. And so it's interesting you talk about that, this notion of humanity being stupid at times and doing these things, because I think another thing that comes across in your Broken Earth series, and it's right there, but evil Earth in a sense, right? That it's not only doing this to ourselves, but what we're doing to the world itself, the ecosystems of the world. And so if you could talk on how that idea of, if you want to call it environmentalism or speaking of ecosystems, how that also influenced your work. 'Cause I mean, I know you went to NASA at one point.
Oh, yeah. Although I'm
So-
sure that they were horrified that I later painted the planet as a living entity. Because the whole point of, I went, it wasn't NASA specifically, it was a workshop sponsored by NASA called Launchpad. Sorry, I had a second of forget. But it's called the Launchpad Workshop, and it's for influencers in media. Which I was shocked to realize that I apparently was one. But where they bring in, because the problem is that one of the reasons the American public misunderstands a lot of basic scientific stuff is because writers and filmmakers and so forth create media that just mangles the science, mangles how things actually work. Are we already?
Oh, no, I got it.
Oh, okay. All right. I was like, damn. So with the Launchpad Workshop, you go to the University of Wyoming for a week, and you spend that living in a dorm and being taught intensive physics classes by a professor. And a professor, Mike Brotherton, who's also a science fiction writer. And we had guest speakers like Phil Platt, the bad astronomer, and all these other people. We would go up to the observatory in Laramie and literally driving up a very narrow road on a mountain in the dark to look out the 6-foot telescope, and we use multiple sizes of telescopes. So we sorry? Oh, okay. We learned about like orbital mechanics and cool stuff like that. So, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was also incredibly intensive, and it reminded me of the fact that I used to love science and I used to love math before I had a couple of teachers that were really bad at teaching it, and before I absorbed the idea that women aren't supposed to be good at math and black people aren't supposed to be good at science. And once I finally kind of started to shake that off, by then I was done with my schooling. But anyway.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
The last story I wrote, I used Google, so I feel like I should step up my game.
Well, you can go to the Launchpad Workshop. Okay, you probably should consider it.
I should think about it.
Yeah. I mean, it is a week in, like, Wyoming.
Okay.
So.
I'll think about it.
Okay.
So I'm going to read you a quote. You mind?
Sure.
You can react to it. So this is the quote. This is the year in which I get to smile to all of those naysayers. Every single mediocre, insecure wannabe who fixes their mouth to suggest that I do not belong on this stage, that people like me cannot possibly have earned, underlined, such an honor, that when they win, it's a meritocracy, but when we win, it's identity politics. I get to smile at those people and lift a massive, shining, rocket-shaped middle finger in their direction. End quote. Could you? Do you mind reacting to who this misanthrope in their galling Hugo acceptance speech?
Yes, I clearly, let's see, what was the word? I'm ungrateful and, what did he say? I'm trying to remember.
I don't know, but it came close to uppity.
Yeah, it was a euphemism for uppity, basically. Yeah. But anyway, there was not universal approbation for. I'm sorry, approval of that speech. Let's just say. But all that said, it felt good to say that. It felt good to give that speech. It felt unbelievably good. I got nothing to say to anybody that has an issue with that statement. They have proven themselves to be part of the problem. And fortunately, they are a minority of voices within the genre. I think the genre in general is starting to understand that the times they have already changed. They are not a change in. You can make all the noise and kick and scream about it all you want, and the kicking and screaming is a pain in the ass. The kicking and screaming hurts people. The kicking and screaming still cuts people out of opportunities and so forth. So it is a problem. But the changes are happening. So might as well suck it up and deal.
Yeah.
So.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so some more questions. We're good for time, right? I think we still have some. So.
Oh, okay.
Just in person, do you watch Insecure?
No, I don't watch much TV. I don't watch much TV, period, because I don't have a whole lot of free time. Well, scratch that. It is better now that I no longer have a day job. But because I spent 20 years basically having two careers, I just never learned. I learned to not watch TV. TV ate up too much free time. So I did used to watch, I saw a few episodes anyway of her web series before
Awkward Black
Insecure.
Girl.
Awkward Black Girl. Okay. Love that. And I really should make time for Insecure, especially considering I apparently know already that Lawrence is some
That was
shit.
my question.
So, yeah, but I've been spoiled on all of it.
Return?
I've been spoiled on all of it. I'm sorry. I have no
Twitter will tell
thoughts
you the
on it.
whole story before you've
Yeah,
already read it.
I have no thoughts on it because Twitter dictates my life. So, yeah.
Well, I know you don't watch TV, but you do spend your time, as far as I know, you're a gamer.
Yeah. Yeah,
All right,
I do
so
watch like the occasional TV show.
Yeah.
I've been making room for The Good Place. I know, it's like weird, but like I'm hooked on The Good Place and I don't want to be. I don't want to be because now I'm like sitting here and waiting for the season 3 and it's really frustrating. Like I hate waiting. And yes, as I take a year to write each book, yes, I know all of you are like, that's how it feels. I'm sorry.
So as a gamer, were you into games when you were younger? Is this something you picked up later on?
Yeah. My cousin had a Pong machine. And he used to show it off to me, and I was really mad about that. But anyway, so yes, literally I've been gaming since Pong. And one of my mom's old boyfriends got me an Atari 2600. Yeah, to try and basically bribe his way into the affections of his girlfriend's kid. And it worked. It worked just fine. I left them alone all the time. I was like, I'm just going to be in here playing my games. And they were terrible games. They were awful games.
But you had Miss Pac-Man, and it used to do that thing.
I didn't even have Miss Pac-Man. I had Frogger.
You had Frogger.
And
Dig Dug?
Huh?
Did you have Dig Dug?
I did not have Dig Dug. I had Frogger, and I had like a couple of other games that were basically just like a cursor in a space moving around.
That thing that used to hit the wall, and it would you'd have to bounce it back and
yeah,
forth.
it wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
Like basically Atari games were some of the world's biggest rip-offs back then.
Until Commodore 64.
I didn't have a computer, though. That's the thing. I didn't have a computer until grad school.
Okay.
So I did not learn to game on computers. I learned to game on consoles, and now to this day, I still game on a console primarily. I have recently gotten into Stardew Valley on my computer. That is the only computer game that I've actually enjoyed. Otherwise, I've been console girl. So I do stream on Twitch for those that want to watch. I periodically, I'm not trying to do the latest, hottest, coolest things. Mostly I'm just playing, doing silly things with old games. I play a thing I call Cheese Skyrim, where you play Skyrim and the whole goal is to collect goat cheese. And then stuff it in a room in one of my houses, and then fill a room up with goat cheese. So I'm sneaking into houses, I'm stealing their cheese, and that's all I do. But I mean, it's because Skyrim doesn't have a plot, I mean, it has a plot, but it's stupid. So you have to make your own entertainment with games.
You're burning
like
so
that.
many bridges here.
If I'm destroying my reputation in your eyes, if you'd thought of me as this, whatever person, now you know. The truth is, I steal cheese.
So do you ever think of any of your books or stories in game form?
Sure, but I mean, nobody's going to give AAA game money to one of my games. I mean, I would love to do an indie game. If I could find an indie game studio that was interested in trying to, and would do it right, would not stick some grizzled brown-haired white dude like the other 10,000 grizzled brown-haired white dude protagonists out there, randomly stick that into one of my books. That would be a problem. But if I could find some indie game studio that was interested in finding a way to gamify something that I wrote, sure, I would be interested to.
Anyone
work
with
with
contacts with indie game studios in the room, you heard it here first.
Sure.
Okay, I know we're running up on the clock, so let's just...
Audience questions, maybe?
Let me give you one more question,
Okay.
if you don't mind. So,
Sure.
you have a new book coming out later this fall, a collection of short stories called How Long Till Black Future Month.
Yeah.
And you have the best front cover, if anybody's seen that front cover of that book.
I'm
Adorable.
loving it, yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about it?
So it is a short story collection of the short stories that I've been writing since about the year 2003. And it's a specific year because before that I did not believe that novelists should write short stories. I was a snob. And I was like, well, novels are a completely different art form. I would not do such a thing. And then I went to the Viable Paradise Writing Workshop and they were like, what's wrong with you? Learn to write short stories, it will make you a better novelist. And they were right. And I also discovered that I enjoyed writing short stories. So this is short stories that I've written over the course of my career. And as I was re-looking at these stories in order to select them for the collection, I was sort of struck by how they show my evolution of social consciousness? I don't even know what to call it. Some of my earlier stories, I don't mention race. I'm very hesitant to edge up to issues that now I'm just kind of like, it's here, people are here, we're black, we're doing things. So things that I now would not hesitate to cover or in terms of theme, I am walking around or sort of being delicate with in my earlier years. And I think that also speaks to the evolution of the genre, because science fiction in those days, you couldn't get things published if you were too blatant. And yeah, we're just talking 2002, but it's changed a lot since then. But then there are some pieces in there that I also didn't publish because I felt like they were a little too in your face. And I was like, well, let's see how they do in this collection. It should be interesting.
Looking forward to reading it.
Yeah.
So
the title is taken from an essay that was like a paean to Janelle Monáe. The essay, unfortunately, will not be in the collection, but it is on my website. You can find it there.
Okay. So I think it's time for audience questions, and the audience is very eager to ask questions, I can see. So who's going to do the selecting here? I'll let you.
Okay.
So so you made yourself vocal, so you go first. Yeah.
First of all, I would like to say congratulations.
Do you have something specific there, or?
No, just how you felt about what the state, because you kind of hinted at it before when you talked about the reception of the Dream Blood series, and you kind of hinted at it at the end when you talked about certain short stories that you were hesitant to try and push.
Oh, how has the improvement worked, basically, or is it happening? Yeah, this room is beautiful, but it has terrible acoustics, so everybody's going to have to use their outside voice when you ask questions here. Let me summarize. So you're basically asking, what do I think is the state of of Black science fiction right now? Okay. I believe that things have improved drastically in the last 10 years, really. Because in 2002, when I was writing, like I said, it was difficult to get a thing published if you mentioned, for example, that the character was Black. I had difficulty getting the Dream Blood books published. The Dream Blood books were my first novels. The Inheritance trilogy got published first, but the Dream Blood books were written first. And so that was only, I got my agent in maybe 2007 or 8. And that was when I tried to get The Killing Moon published first, and it got roundly rejected by every publishing house in New York City. And some of the rejections said things like, I don't know what its audience will be. I don't know how to market this book. I don't know who to sell it to. Because there was this pervasive perception in the genre among editors that Black people didn't read science fiction, and that science fiction and fantasy readers did not read Black people. So that was literally about 10 years ago. But in that time, there have been some massive changes, largely due to social media. And social media giving marginalized people a greater voice, giving non-marginalized people who just want something other than the generic old school privileged white dude, cishet focused science fiction and fantasy, giving them a voice to say, we want something new. And because the audience has risen up to tell the establishment, we want something other than what you've been giving us, that has opened the door for me and a whole lot of other writers, I think. So I think that's a good thing.
So more questions, I think I saw. Oh,
well,
sorry.
I'll let you take care of that. Yeah. No, just like, because we're both going to be
I saw
like
your hand
cross-posting.
Yeah, and I should look this way.
I originally started on the Xbox 360, but then I upgraded to the PS4 and bought the special edition because the sunsets are so pretty. Like, I'll play a whole game of Skyrim and just stop and look at the sky all the time. Yeah, and then fucking dragons. Then the dragons come and and I'm just like, I was looking at the sunset.
We have a question over here.
I'm sorry. Oh no.
There are characters in each of your books that seem to be sort of looking at similar ideas from different facets. You can see DNA from the Guardians and the Gatherers, for example, where there are people who are working maybe in really violent terms to achieve something noble in the frame of sort of a moral system.
Okay.
I'm curious about whether there are characters or moments in your books where you are sort of grappling with an idea and
Grappling with the idea of?
like different contexts of your novel to present an opportunity to look at something that interests you in a different way, in a different character.
I mean, yes. Okay, so for those that could not hear the question, to summarize, I tend to write similar archetypes in each book, if I'm getting at that. Okay, I'm seeing a no.
Archetypes, but as the strand of DNA that maybe could have bubbled to the surface in a different way in an opportunity.
Well, I'm thinking offhand of people have told me that Hoa and CA are very similar. And you mentioned the Guardians and the Gatherers are similar. in that they're both seeking peace through violent solutions, which I had not noticed before, so that's interesting. I don't intend to write any of the, I don't set out to explore that DNA, to use your language. I don't set out, creepy kids are fascinating to me, so I write creepy kids. I love children. I'm a proud auntie to many, but kids can be creepy as fuck. They don't intend to be, and I'm fascinated by that. Or kids that are, I have met children who have been through trauma, and there is an eerie air from the perspective of those who are used to kids that are happy and healthy and have never suffered. But when you meet kids that have seen some shit, those kids are older than they should be. That's not creepy, it's just a thing that I tend to, my mind latches onto because I see the working of the trauma and I wonder what can be done to heal them. So that's Nasun, for example. People tell me that Nasun doesn't read like a 10-year-old. She reads like a 10-year-old who's seen some shit. Yeah. Because I've met 10-year-olds like that. And the things that they have in some cases been through are horrible. And kids grow up fast when they have to. But so that's what I guess I'm exploring. For me, the archetypes that interest me most are people whose backgrounds reflect a certain complexity that comes from surviving trauma. And that's probably just because I was a counselor for a lot of my day job life. It's not a conscious thing. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Well, it will have to be. Unfortunately,
no.
I've been told
okay.
that we are out of time.
What?
However, Nora will be signing. There will be a book signing.
Yeah, downstairs.
And so you will, I don't know how, she'll probably sign your book and ask you not to have your questions very long. If you had anything really short, you can ask me then. But thank you, everyone, for coming out. Please, thank you for Jemisin for the interview.
Wow, that was fast. I was not expecting that to be so fast. Yeah, I talked too damn much.
Ask questions. I'm not going to get to them all because I don't want dead air.
Well, I also talk too much. That's my own fault.
That's great.
Hi. All right, I'm going to head downstairs.
Great. I'm supposed to take this.